This is the Open Global Mind weekly call on Thursday, November 13th, 2025. We have a fun topic today, which is what happened to curiosity. I think I have a funny feeling that many of us have our own theories about this, our own hypotheses. So I'm interested maybe in collecting up a couple of those before we go in. Victoria has put a link in the chat, which we may need to put in a couple times because as people come into the room, they don't see the previous chat. So we'll probably have to repeat it. But Victoria went to town on an Excalidraw board that is multi-user, so everybody can go look at it. Maybe a thing I can do, actually, definitely a thing I can do is screen share mine, my screen so that everybody can see it on mine for a moment. So here is the Excalidraw board. I see that several people are already in it. And you can scroll around and this looks way more interesting and elaborate than when it started, which was, I guess, yesterday morning. So fabulous. Love this work. And I think everybody can go ahead and add things. I believe, and Victoria, if you want to do a tutorial, let me know and you can take over. But just for the moment, if you wanted to add a box with some comments, see the little menu at the top, click on the rectangle, and then basically make a box and start typing in it and give it a color. Over here is the color selection if you want to sort of fit the mood and method of this whole thing. I'm going to try to delete my box. There we go. And it's pretty straightforward. And the settings right now are so that lines look like they're a little hand-drawn and the text is a nice handwritten sort of text, which gives the whole Excalidraw board a nice feeling of sort of humanity. And looks like it was created by people drawing on a board. It's very, very nice.
And just to make everyone comfortable, I have a copy of this state of the board. So if everything is messed, it doesn't matter.
Beautiful. So Victoria has taken a snapshot and we're off to the races. So riff on this, add to it, do whatever. Victoria, anything you want to add to what I just described?
Well, my only remark is what it's at the top left corner, because in the mail, we were given many solutions and closing very early the problem. And that's not what we should strive for. We should strive for open as many questions as possible. So if instead of saying education closes curiosity, we state it as a question, does education close up? Then we will have more things to work with.
Sounds great. I tend to think of it as just the positing of multiple theories instead of the choosing of one to close it down.
The thing is gathering all the opinions, but trying to show that we are not closing, but opening.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thank you, thank you. So with that, I'll stop my screen share and hope that everybody can follow the links and get into the Excalidraw. And see if anybody wants to take an opening step, or Victoria, if you want to take an opening step into the conversation, that would be great too.
Well, for me, as you have seen, it's like an ongoing theme. Like when I first talked to you, Jerry, and you said that trust and consumerism were your things. So the other day, I understood that this also has been always a concern for me. And seeing how it exploded in the community, I thought, okay, instead of each of us like taking it to one place or another, why don't we get everything inside so we can maybe decide, we can work, because here today I have the issue of access that links with the fact that you say books are like fossil knowledge. it's trapped. There are also the silos, the academia that you need subscriptions, paid subscriptions to. So there are a lot of things going on. So maybe we must like gather everything and start thinking how this relates to different OGM projects, or maybe different things that can start from here. So I wanted to link this issue with the other issues that are going around in the community.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's great. I love that. Kevin, please.
Is the premise that we are losing or curiosity is being diminished? If that's it, I completely disagree. So I'm curious.
I think the question started as, hey, kids in school seem incurious, things like that are happening. Like, are we losing curiosity? And I think in general, the room will agree with you that no, no, no. And in particular, we have a selection bias problem here, which is that I think everybody in this room is like really, really curious and probably hangs out with really curious people. But Victoria, I don't know if you want to address that or anybody else.
I'll say something on it. Oh, Scott, sorry, you were ahead of me.
Oh, I guess I hit my buzzer faster than you. Um, what struck me as interesting in this, I agree with you, Jerry, that we have a bias of the people in the room because this room attracts those kinds of people. And my argument would be that this group tends to be high in openness. So if we look at the Big Five personality model, which is the most statistically verified model of personality, openness is one of the 5 dimensions. And that dimension is people who tend to be creative, interested in intellectual pursuits, open to new things and new ways, curious, and it exists on a spectrum. There are people who are low in openness, and neither end of the spectrum is evolutionarily better, which is why we have the spectrum. Sometimes you need to be less open and you need to be more literal or more practical or more tradition or history or ritual. And sometimes you need to be more open and more accepting and more combining and more far reaching and that sort of thing, which is why my understanding of it is why we have both ends. But my thought is that if we're looking for people who are, or if we're seeing things where evidence of less curious, we're going to continue to notice all of those instances where people are less curious. And I think those are the people who are less on the open side. And that I tend to agree that it's not, I haven't seen a sea change in that. But that was one thing I wanted to put out there, is that I believe it exists on a range. And that's the Big Five model kind of supports that.
Thanks, Scott. Gil, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I've raised this a couple of times out of personal experience, which may have all kinds of selection bias in it. I've observed the initial assessment that I formed was that people much younger than me were not curious, and how that showed up is conversations with them where I would ask them questions and they would not ask me questions, which I found perplexing. And I found this even more striking in networking situations where you're meeting somebody at a conference and you're chatting. And I've been really struck at how one way those conversations have been. And so I've taken recently to doing something I've never done before. It's like start to talk about things in the course of meeting someone new. I'll start to talk about what I'm up to, what I'm doing, what I want to talk about, what I would have wanted to be asked about. And then the conversation proceeds kind of normally. They're interested and there's back and forth. But the initiation, what I'm calling curiosity of asking questions about somebody else, what they're thinking, interested in, doing, or so forth, I'm noticing it in its absence. But to qualify what I just said, I was remembering last night, Jane and I had dinner a few months ago, with a person who we've known since she was like 12, but she's now 55 or something like that. And she made us a lovely buffet. We had spent the afternoon in her backyard. um, spent about 3 hours together. And she didn't ask a single question of us. How we doing? How's your life? How's your health? She knows that Jane has been going through major health issues for many years. To somebody who knows her and loves her and didn't ask anything. I became increasingly uncomfortable. I was really baffled. I didn't figure out what was weird until afterwards. But I've never been in a situation like that. So that it echoes the question about curiosity. It challenges my assumption that it's a phenomenon of younger people because she's, not younger. She's younger than us, but she's not young. So and let me throw one more data point into this, which is an old one. So early on in Natural Logic, we were doing lots of site assessments of companies, looking at efficiency and footprint reduction opportunities. And one of my junior staff members, who's actually not so junior, like an engineer, smart, analytical, had been with me on a number of these, and he finally went out on one of his own. And when he came back, I was really struck at all kinds of information that he hadn't gathered. And we kind of unpacked what he talked with the staff at the company about. And I would say, well, did you ask him about ABC? He said, God, I didn't think of that. So this is maybe not curiosity, but it's the map of distinctions that leads somebody on a trail of investigation. It was very striking how different his what I called curiosity was, and how we had to kind of train him up in being curious, investigating. Let me stop there. There's more to say, but I want to not hog the mic here. I'll stop there.
Gil, I'm really appreciating your first person stories. I really like that, this person is doing this because I'm coming into this partly from having read a few too many stories about how incurious recent graduates seem to be when they come into work, which leads us into the education conversation. Is something happening to our kids who are busy cramming but not learning? Have we stamped out sort of inquisitiveness in the schooling system? And we'll go there. But I think there's lots of other things going on that your stories are pointing to. Go ahead.
And let me just say one other thing before I yield to Alex. I put a note in the chat. I'm an etymology geek, so I started quickly looking for etymology and found this thing saying, well, there's this curious etymology. Curious etymology. Curiosity relates to care, cura. And so in this formulation, they're saying its origins reveal a deeper truth. To be curious is to care enough to pay attention. So that may be a false trail, or that may be a relevant piece of this conversation. I don't know.
That's lovely. I think that the etymology is important as well.
And
Thanks.
Victoria, thank you. I stuck that into the drawing.
Beautiful. Yep.
Maybe not
I saw that you
skillfully,
did
but
that.
there it is.
Excellent. Alex, please.
Thanks. I suddenly realized I didn't have it. So the points that have been made so far are they're on the academic side of curiosity. I thought when we first mentioned it, we'd start talking about the curiosity in the sense that we're so polarized that each side, or whoever it is, and I can go through the recordings and I can find at least one example where each one of you has made a statement, and I'm thinking, but why don't you look at it from this point of view? And it'll disprove your statement. Okay, every single one of you, I'm sure I'll come up with. It's inherent in us. We want to feel good. So it depends on the topics. If it's politics and we're on the left or the right, we don't want to challenge our mental model and belief system. So that's one of the obstacles to being curious. And it really puzzles me because, and many people have said this in the Twitter sphere or wherever it is, that it's really amazing that we as humans will go to page 1 and we'll read about some politician announcing a new this, that, and the other, and say how great the politician is if we support them. And then we'll go to number 5, page 5 of a newspaper, and there's an article of what shysters the politicians are. And we can compartmentalize the two and not cross-feed. If he's a shyster over there, if that party is lying over there, what tells you that they tell the truth here? And that to me, it's curiosity, or maybe that I'm using the wrong word, which amazes me because I do it and I'm sure everybody else does it. And yet we know it, it's sort of, so the other thing was about the young. I had personal experience with my kids. What can I say? I enjoy talking, discussing things with them if there's no belief system involved, be it politics, religion, whatever it is. We have a great conversation. But as soon as we start discussing things we care about, and remember the mechanic here is, oh, Dad's an old what's-it, so he's not going to think about it the way as us. But what amazes me is their reluctance to even hear or question what the belief system, something that might challenge the belief system. It really is amazing. And I do think, Jerry, you mentioned it. It's to do with the way we've been taught. And it isn't something that's just happened. I think it's happened over time, that we kind of, maybe it's the influence of TV, because it's an acceptance machine. And on TV, you don't actually challenge anything. You just watch and enjoy. You don't interact with it or something like that. Maybe radio as well. Maybe how the technology has grown, but young people, I think it's a teaching system, or what they're fed information. And I always used to think I was challenged at school to think differently, but maybe I wasn't. I don't know. But that was the point I wanted to see, is that we're all doing this every day. Even in this call, we will do it. That we're not. You guys call it curiosity. I call it the not standard, or what you see in front of you point of view. Oh, that was it. That was me. Have you consider yourself all told off for not being perfect?
Oh, totally. Totally, Alex. Thank you. I'm thinking at first, I am noticing that my image is flashing green every now and then. I think it's my little USB hub, which is not happy that I've got the microphone plugged in as well as the camera through it. So I'm going to troubleshoot that. But in case you're like, what's going on with Jerry? It's not that I'm phoning in from a different planet. It's that some of my systems are not cooperating properly. Alex, I think a piece of what you were pointing to, I would have called critical thinking, and I'm also realizing that we could have replaced the word curiosity with the phrase critical thinking in the invite to today's call, and probably would have gotten a similar showing. And maybe that's a topic for future. It's adjacent, as Gil says, right after right after my thing. Scott's unsure, but there's a piece of what I think you're raising, Alex, which is about our identity and our self-image and the preservation of self, or even the development of self, and who we think we are and where we think we stand. And I think there's an interesting bit of conversation here about, are we now afraid to take a stand? Are we confused about where the stands are? Do we think that taking a stand has become dangerous because of the level of the poor level of discourse out there in the public arena? Are we afraid of being canceled, or afraid of being pounded or trolled or whatever else? And those all seem, more or less legitimate in the current environment. Let me go to Pete. And Alex, if you'll take your hand down from before. Pete, please.
Thank you, Jerry. And Alex, thanks for telling us all off. I appreciate it. I guess I wanted to say that I see declines in curiosity, but I think I also see increases in curiosity too. So I think it changes, the landscape, it keeps changing. I certainly know there are places where we kill curiosity. Living in an entertainment culture where you're supposed to sit back and consume but not participate is obviously a bad thing. The way that we do education, as a kid growing up in school, there were lots of ways teachers killed my curiosity, and worse for other people in my classes. I wanted to the reason I raised my hand and wanted to say something was because of Gil's story about the person that he and Jane know, that didn't ask about them, and it reminds me, I learned from Joanne, my wife, to be able to have to be able to be curious and have a conversation with somebody, even if maybe you don't care in the grander scheme of things, or you're shy or whatever. I'm kind of shy. And it's just a rote thing, right? It's just human and polite to be sitting with somebody and to ask them, how's your life? Do you have pets? Do you have friends? Where did you grow up? Those kinds of things. It's not hard to do. And I know I went from somebody who didn't have that as a skill that I was ever taught really by my parents or my peers or my school. I learned that very quickly from Joanne. And so one of certainly some curiosity is innate. I've got a lot of innate curiosity, and probably most of the people in this room do. The place where I see that most nowadays is actually working with AI. I've spent a lot of time showing people how, this AI thing, and there are a lot of people who they play with it for a little bit and it doesn't do anything interesting, and then they're done. And I'm like, well, when I tried playing with it, it was actually hard work. I remember having to sit down and go, okay, what can I do with it now? What crazy thing could I give it? I used to do things like write poetry in 3 different languages, come up with a short story that starts with blah, come up with, all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was not second nature to do that with this new information tool. It was something I had to work through, but I was so curious about it, I worked through it. And I see a lot of people bouncing off new technology because of that. Same thing, when people adopted the internet. Same thing when people adopted PCs. I was an early adopter of those, and I was like, I don't know what it does, but let me find out. Let me try to break it. Let me try to do crazy stuff with it. Can it do this? Can it do that? So some is definitely innate. Some curiosity is definitely innate. But another thing that Gil's story made me realize is some curiosity is a social practice. I somewhere in our world, it ought to end up that you get taught by your peers or your school or your parents or somebody, here's some things that you can do to enact curiosity, even if you're not particularly interested. Just enact it as a social practice because it helps everybody. It helps people feel good when you talk about them. It helps you learn stuff that you wouldn't have known otherwise when you're got a few hours riding in a carriage or in an airplane or whatever we do nowadays. So that was what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. Stacy.
Thanks, Pete. I have to address what you said first, or maybe second. Yeah, I'll do that after. Or maybe you have to get that out of the way first. Just on the other side of yeah, curiosity when it's not genuine can also be really annoying. It's like, yeah, let me just get that off my chest, because it, at least for me, I don't know if I want to say as a woman or not. As someone who sometimes feels or has felt disempowered, sometimes curiosity can feel like I have to explain myself. So I just want to put that out there.
It feels like prying.
Say it again.
It feels like prying, you mean, or?
Yeah, or like having to justify why I'm doing what I'm doing. When it's genuine, it's wonderful. There's
And if I
nothing.
may, when I learned this kind of social curiosity from Joanne, her observation as a woman was men are acculturated to not be curious, especially about women, but lots of stuff, right? And so in a way, it was a kind of women's work that she doesn't mind doing because it's not the worst thing that women have to do in this world. But she felt like she was always the one who were like, it's not that hard, guys. Just ask questions. And you're entirely correct. Insincere curiosity is worse than just shutting
Yeah.
up. However, I would also say it's not hard at all to learn to ask humbly and be genuinely interested in the answer. Where did you grow up? It's not. It's I can ask that question and not care about the answer, but it's not hard as a social practice for me to say I really do care where you grew up. And I hope you ask where I grew up too, but if you don't, I understand that you're not as careful as I am, or you're not as polite or whatever. I'm gonna like shine that on. And I know women have to do that a lot more than men. So
Yeah. And you know me, I'm probably the wrong person because I'm not doing anything I don't want to do. So I'm sorry, anybody. I probably don't care where you live, so somebody else will ask you.
well, you ask even better
Forgive
questions,
me.
Stacey. But
Forgive me.
there's a set of like 5 questions that even a man can learn. Ask this question and really care about the answer. And there's probably a follow-up question. Where did you go to school? That's pretty
Okay.
simple to
Anyway, let
view.
me
Go
say
ahead.
what I
I'm
really
sorry to
want
have interrupted you.
to.
Now I'm curious what you're going to say.
Okay, this is what I want to. I want to go back to. I want to connect to where Gil was speaking, because I was reminded of George Monbiot, where he says, "Where we don't have a story, we make up one," and I want to
Mm.
connect to Gil's stories. So when he was speaking about like coaching, and I was thinking, so the people that don't ask questions, then the story that I made up in my mind is that sometimes people that are either younger, or if I could replace that with less experience, because they might be the same age, but they might be less experienced, sometimes they haven't had the space to talk. And so they don't want to ask questions and hear experience because they are just dying to have somebody hear them. So I want to throw that out. And as far as the people that were talking to Jane, sometimes people are afraid to hear the answers and they're so uncomfortable with sickness and they don't want to know. And I wanted to throw that out too, because sometimes really caring, loving people are just so uncomfortable with feelings and don't know what to say. And that calls in, the curiosity kind of killed the cat thing. So sometimes we don't ask questions. Well, I'm looking at the lawyer in the corner. Doug, you're in the corner. And it's like, don't ask the question that you don't know the answer to. So, those are some stories some possible stories. I tend to be somebody, I will ask the question because I don't want to make up a story in my head. It's usually, I've found in my life, it's better to ask the question and know for sure than to just imagine what the answer is. And do I have any other question? Anything? Okay, I think I covered everything I wanted to say. Over.
Yay. Thank you, Stacey. You're reminding me of a conversation I'm having on LinkedIn where I put a post in about futurists and future visions and how they're all kind of crappy. And a friend of mine posted in the comments about maybe we don't need future visions. Maybe what we need is to be really present. And it kind of flipped the game on me. And it was really interesting because I find that whatever model I have of where we're going and the competing models of where we're going, I love that conversation and that battle, but I also find that my behavior changes enormously depending on what I think I want in the future. I need those visions in order to figure out how to be present. And so I haven't seen her response to that, but we're in the middle of that conversation right now. It's kind of cool. Mr. Jones, thanks for your patience.
Thank you. Well, I think my success in life has been based on not paying attention in school. because I never could figure out what they wanted, and it didn't seem like much. But then when I got into business, I understood I was in a fluid dynamic system that people were passionate about, and they were making things and buying things and selling things. And it was my briar patch. And I remember my friend Ben Santer, and his story I think is really relevant. He was a PhD candidate who failed 3 times and was working in day labor in Seattle. And the one professor who still believed in him got him a gig copying maps in an ag weather company. And he suddenly understood climate, and it was a big enough thing, just like school wasn't big enough, climate was. He was the author of the first UN report on climate. And one of the reasons he was the author is he had a really, his ego was really in check, because he remembered if he hadn't had that one day labor come through, he would still be, day laborers don't stay very stable. And so he was the one everybody trusted. And it was only when he just saw, a weather map of Kansas and, what was going to happen to corn, and suddenly understood the system he was in. And, he and I are similar in that way, is that, again, not paying attention to school was a great gift. And because I found the place where I did fit, it was a fluid dynamic system, with elements of reciprocity. And so Ben was the same way. So I think, you have to survive school, but I don't see people low, it's just, they hadn't found their briar patch. That's what I think.
Thanks, Kevin. Scott.
I want to throw a scatter bomb of different ideas. So I'm looking for a theme here. All right, this is one I don't know. I like this idea that Pete had brought up about asking people. I do it all the time. I talk to the people at the checkout line in the grocery store and things like that. I like to think, as a 59-year-old, that I'm not that creepy old guy, that I'm actually sincere, that we have a pleasant exchange, that I know a little something about them and what they're like, and it's better than a simply pure transactional thing. I'm wondering, and this is the part that I don't know, is are our young people being raised to not do that because we don't want to discriminate based on any of the discrimination factors that we shouldn't discriminate on, and that we shouldn't be intrusive, as you said, and that the idea of sharing things about yourself is more often, or can be used, especially online, for insult rather than connection. And we're going to seek to avoid pain more than we are towards pleasure. And the internet's forever, and so online, if you share personal things about yourself, they're generally unneeded for the conversation that you're having, because it's about some other topic or it's not germane, and it can be used against you. And maybe that's part of it personally, and the other part is that maybe we're taught don't ask those things. We're not supposed to inquire about race and religion and gender and all of those things, because it causes trouble. And the last thought that I had that was all connected into that was that I met my wife online, and I say often that it was the best thing, because I had to meet the person before I could meet the person. And it stripped away all the other stuff. I just had to get to know this individual, and it has worked out extremely well because of that.
Thanks, Scott. Victoria.
I just wanted to make a real follow-up on this conversation about caring by presenting you all my friend Gabriel, who has joined us because this
I
morning
remember.
we were walking together. He in Italy, I in Spain, but we were working together. And I told him about this session. And since he's young, so this is a different perspective. And since he's studying to be a teacher or help people learn, I thought it was important that we can hear his voice, even if he's not raising the hand. That's all.
Victoria, thank you very much. And I was sort of looking for a place to say hi to Gabriele and let him jump in. If you'd like to say anything or just introduce yourself, please feel free right now.
Okay, thank you. It's so curious to be here. Um, just the connection that happens through internet is astounding to me. I'm glad to hear your conversation. By now, I don't want to jump in because I still trying to put my thoughts in order, but it's really uh, good things to be here. So thank you for having opened your door, internet door for me now.
That's great. Thank you. What city in Italy are you in?
I'm in Padua, near Venice.
Very cool.
Padua.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. LP1, are you Dawn Bergen or Louise King or?
I'm Louise. Hello,
You are
everyone.
Louise. Okay. You look so much like my friend Dawn. That's very funny. Thanks for joining us, Louise.
Yes, and I've joined today because I am teaching. I'm teaching in an international section in a French lycée. And I'm trying to decide whether I am seeing a decline in curiosity and confidence in my classroom or whether it's just I'm getting old. We always hear that from the previous generation or the young people today. They're not curious, they're not whatever. But I would say that the last couple of years, I have really begun to wonder if it's me or if it's them. Some of the things I see is I do see many students lacking in confidence. They're asking some of the most basic things. Can I use colour miss? Can I use whiteout? Should I underline? Should I? And it's like I have to say to them, you can make those decisions. They aren't challenging decisions. They're not important decisions. You can make those for yourself. And I am seeing this anxiety of them, making the simplest of moves. The other one is I really think I've seen a decline in attention and focus and involvement in tasks. I was reflecting on a particular class that I gave an assessment to recently, and I've done the same assessment perhaps for the past 4 or 5 years, and literally it's the very worst performance I've ever had. So I'm the same teacher in the room, and this is a really poor performance across. I know there are lots of factors there. So that's one of the reasons I'm here. I've got a bit of a thing about technology. I'm a maths teacher, and definitely with the use of calculators, I've seen a great decline in students' mental abilities. Now, there is the feeling that that doesn't matter. They're using calculators, and as long as they can still think mathematically, it doesn't matter if they're not doing calculations or they're not graphing or they're not. But I wonder if it does diminish their mental capacity for understanding if they haven't done it themselves. So now I see them using ChatGPT to literally write their essays. We're going to see a decline in the skills of writing, of expressing their ideas in the written word. Although again, you could argue, does that matter? We're moving away from the printed word. We're moving back to video, to the spoken word, spreading ideas through the spoken word. So is it important if they can no longer write? So I'm full of all these questions about my situation. I did have that thought that, because I see this, is curiosity innate or can we teach it? I try to teach problem solving. I see some students are just there. They just have ideas, they try them out. It doesn't work, they'll try something different. They might be asking questions. And I see other students who simply are there going, I don't know what to do. And I have never seen myself, despite I've tried hard, I've tried different methods, I've never seen a student learn how to problem solve. They either seem to have it or they don't. They might be really great at lots of other things, so that's brilliant, but they're not doing that aspect of it. I'm sorry to go on, but I've got a couple of other things to say. I'm
Please,
somebody
can you tell us what grade you teach, just so I can?
I teach. I don't know what the French grades are. Just let me tell you, I teach 11-year-olds through to 17-year-olds.
Thank you. Please continue.
Um, we've been talking about the curiosity and social situations as well. I have a very poor memory for vocabulary. I have to be immersed in a vocabulary for quite a long time. I'm probably dyslexic, but too old to have had any certification. I dread talking to people and trying to be curious about them because I won't remember the details. And the worst thing that can happen to me is I meet them again. So if I meet any of you again, I can't remember the name. I can't remember where they live. They've told me all these things about them. And for that sort of detail, my head is a sieve. So I think there are all sorts of things if you're talking about curiosity and social situations. You've got your culture, you've got your upbringing, and you've got your confidence in, maintaining those relationships over a period of time. So maybe that's enough from me. Thank you.
That's delightful. Louise, thank you for joining us. You reminded me that sitting behind me is my dad's old slide rule, and that I once, many, many, many years ago in my youth, knew how to run it and understood, because my dad had sort of approached it that way, that the slide rule is a fantastic way to estimate things, that engineers were able to just quickly ballpark things, to do is it Fermi? One of the physicists was Feynman, Fermi, one of those, who was really good at sort of quick estimations of large scale things. So we're kind of losing that as well.
Well, young students can't do mental arithmetic. They just don't understand. And they think I'm a genius because I can do mental arithmetic on the board while I'm solving problems. I mean,
Have
they're
you
in
seen the
awe.
movie Idiocracy?
I haven't. I'll look it out.
Just saw it.
Yeah, it's
Eric?
alas a little bit too topical for what we're talking about. It's in the future, one guy wakes up from an accidental cryogenic sleep, and suddenly it turns out he's the smartest human in the country. So they make him president because he's the only one who knows like the most primitive things. It's a dark comedy, but
Right.
you'll unfortunately probably enjoy it because of your setting. Doug, please.
Yeah, I can't help but sort of feel that the question is sort of a straw man, because it's am I judging somebody else not being curious enough is what's really being put on the table. And the underlying active ingredient to me is connection. And if somebody if I'm not in connection with the person I'm talking to, then there's really no way to engage. And my experience with younger folk is sort of is a little bit bivalent. My son, who's around 30, is, in some undiagnosed way, because he defied all testing, he's, neurodivergent, and he falls into that category of hypersocial, like the quintessential salesman. And he's endlessly curious. He is always either asking questions or going into gymnastics, and has Ulysses like status in the company he works in, because people have seen him repairing his own flat tires, which captures this last point that was just made, that, you know, like he learned how to do that. And somebody, you know, his peers think that's insanely amazing that he knows how to do that. And conversely, there's a rationality to younger people being disconnected because of the insanity of the educational system they're subjected to. And the
So you're
difference
saying
is that
partly this could be a rational response to a really crappy system they're embedded
to a
in.
really insane world that they're staring at and going,
Yeah.
what am I, you know, what am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to respond to this? And I do think there is a, you know, as much as they may not have basic underlying skills that we have because we're creatures of the, you know, 20th century, that they do have a clarity and awareness of their world and their position in it. And there's a certain level of agency and empowerment that also came with the fact that, you know, they get what they want when they want it. What they're not interested in, they're not interested in. What they are interested in, they are interested in. Everything's immediate gratification, and they are the kings and queens of their own domain via their screens.
Mm.
And their whole orientation and experience of the world is a completely different, like, you know, stranger in a strange land compared to my orientation. So it's a different world. And my curiosity in that is to try to get to their understanding and perspective and experience of it. And wanting to know that, wanting to understand that from the inside out, not from the outside looking at. So I just wanted to toss that into the mix.
Doug, thank you for layering in a bunch of really interesting other perspectives on the question. I mean, you've got me thinking, is curiosity a superficial trait, and connection is the thing we seek? And you know, in that sense, do we need to be talking and inquiring and inquisitive in order to connect? And I think the answer is no, we don't. We can actually connect without those things, sometimes really deeply. There's all kinds of interesting questions on the table. Judy, off to you.
I need to unmute.
No, you're already unmuted. We hear you.
Okay. I think it's a really complicated topic in the sense that there's intrinsic and extrinsic curiosity, and it can be enabled or made less popular by circumstantial situations. So we might want to scope this out more broadly, because I think there's a lot of intrinsic curiosity, but it can be stifled very easily if people are put down for asking questions or such. And I know I was a hugely curious kid, and so I did get suppressive comments at times. Fortunately, I got reinforcing behaviors from my family structure, so I persisted. But I think that this is a really important topic, because it's not just curiosity per se, it's acquisition of knowledge and the process of gaining perspective from examining the full scope and breadth of a topic. And I think that's a bigger question for me in the educational system right now, because I don't think we're encouraging that type of in-depth consideration of opposite points of view. For instance, if you think A, well, what is the opposite of A position? What are all the positions in between? How do you sort that out to find what seems to be the best? And that's different than sort of intrinsic curiosity, which I think small children have, but it can be stifled. I'll just
Love
stop
that.
there.
And you were fortunate to grow up in an environment, in a family that sort of counteracted other stimuli, which is great. Thanks, Judy. Klaus.
Yeah, I think we are talking about different types of curiosity. So there's this interpersonal curiosity, which is really very cultural. I worked for Disney for 21 years, and when we moved to the Hong Kong project, we got set up with a relocation service, and they started us out with a book called Culture Shock Hong Kong, and gave us an in-depth briefing on what to say and not to say to people. Then I went to Germany from there after 21 years with Disney, and worked for a very large German corporation, Metro, in the corporate office. I was just shocked what people would ask me. It was just so off the wall from an American perspective, very personal questions that if you ask that an American, you would be considered rude, So there is this interpersonal, which is very cultural, and then we operated in 30 countries. So I would go to India, to China, to Russia, Romania, Italy, Spain, right? And it's really very unique how people have basic expectations about what you should be curious about and where the lines are. But then there's this other curiosity about your world, your profession, just the world around you, the society you live in, the political life, and to want to have a better understanding of that. And I think the information we have available today is so amazingly more, than there ever was. Because of social media and because of the access to the internet and all of that. It's probably overwhelming now for particularly younger people who haven't found a foundation yet to know themselves more, and to be more secure in their own being. So I don't know if we can randomly say that curiosity is less than what it used to be, because the world around us has just changed so much, and the information is so focused and so concentrated and so available, that I don't think we can even begin to compare ourselves to someone who lived 100 years ago or even 50 years ago.
Yeah. Doug was starting that piece of the conversation about maybe kids today are growing up in such a dramatically different world, and we're trying to apply archaic ideas about curiosity to a completely different environment. That's an interesting take. Eve, please. Yay.
Hey, wonderful to see everyone here. Well, if you'll be so kind to let me share and integrate something else I've been thinking about, another angle to curiosity, and thinking about the world as it's reshaped by loss of norms and migration and digital life and climate shifts. Our sense of place is more about the connections and meanings we choose. So curiosity intersects with this sense of place. My background is architecture. That keeps our sense of place alive rather than static. And one where we continually rediscover what grounds us and challenges us and expands our sense of who we are in relation to the world. So for many, maybe 15 to 25-year-olds, maybe the sense of place is shaped as much by their digital communities and global influences as by their immediate surroundings. And it's so different than how we all grew up, like in the 70s when I grew up living somatically, going to the creek, looking at the tadpoles, learning about things by hiking or walking, and living in our bodies in our own physical contexts. So I just think it's so different. Anyway, I just want to bring up the sense of place.
Thank you very much. Gil.
Yeah, I've been listening to that very thing, Eve, context throughout this whole conversation. Context and norms is what's been echoing me throughout this. And I'm hearing Ken Homer, who's not here yet, with his question, his ever-present question about who's we, and the corollary question of who's they, which has been throughout this whole conversation, where there's a whole we and they thing going on here, and it's very not specific. And it's very relevant because we're talking about conversations with people who are other in some sort of way. You know, different gender, different generation, different geography, different life experience, different schooling, different roles, and so forth. So it's something about our expectations across those differences and the acculturation, the norms. Pride and Prejudice has been rolling in my mind as we're talking here. You know, where there was a richly nurtured culture of propriety and manners and how to speak and how not to speak. And it's different across different classes, not just between the lords and the servants, but between the landowners and the middle class and the tradespeople in town. They're very different patterns of relationship and speech and expectation and what could be asked for. LP1, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Louise.
Louise. Yeah, hi, Louise. You know, you talked about how the French are very direct, but the French are different in different parts of France, as the Americans are very different in different parts of the United States. Trust me, I grew up in New York and I live in the Bay Area. You know, really different standards and practices about what you talk about and what you don't, and what you can ask about and what you can't. So all of which is to say that the we who is raising the question in this conversation, and the they who we are talking about, is a very important and unstated part of this conversation.
Thanks, Gil. If you want to,
very fluid. Sorry.
If you want to deepen your own perceptions of the we's and they's, please feel free, because as always, the elaboration helps us. Kevin, please.
Yeah, you know, Gil's comment is actually really right on to where I was going. I worked with a friend with the Eastern Band Cherokee, and we were working on a new product development for them that would diversify their income past casinos. And we created a thing with them for the Taste of Cherokee, and they had some vegetables that had been cultivated, that had been domesticated, that they could brand. And but the question that they came back with, and they took forever because tribes do, they realized that they did not want to make food, and it was the Taste of Cherokee, right? That was the thing. And they said they didn't want to make food a commodity. It should be something where if someone is hungry and they come to your door, you feed them. They said that, you know, on the other hand, the Choctaw and the Chickasaw would have done it. They're more transactional tribes. But the question that the Cherokee always ask, especially when you're dealing with the Katua band of Cherokee, which are the more traditional and creative, is what does this decision make us in the world under the standpoint of reciprocity? And it's like, oh, this turns feeding people into a commodity thing, and we sell it, and you know, they sell their crops. Their double weave baskets can sell for a couple $1,000 because they can hold water. They're amazing. But I haven't seen other groups say, what does this decision make us? Because, you know, this was going to do a lot for them. You know, they have casino revenue and they don't have a lot of other revenue. And, but they turned down the chance to have a really popular brand in Western North Carolina because it would make them something that they don't want to be. And so, but it takes a tribe in a circle a long time to make that decision. And so when you're dealing with them, you know, the fastest way to get things done when working with a tribe is to have all the time in the world. And so we had posters made up, we had labels, and you know, they just threw them away. I mean, it was their dollar, but it was so that's an interesting question, and I don't see white folks asking that question much.
Kevin, thank you for the story. It seems like they went deep into their culture and thought about what were the influences or effects on their culture of this kind of decision, where we have been born into and have assumed away and normalized a transactional environment.
You often want a Choctaw to run their business because the
That's
Choctaw
hilarious.
are much more transactional commercial folks.
That's like having a Shabbos goy turn your switches on and off on Shabbat. It's very
something
cool.
like that. It's yeah, they don't think transactionally well. The Choctaw have always done that, and I could go further into the Choctaw, but yeah.
Thank you so much for that story. Gil, please.
It's a wonderful story, Kevin. Thank you. And the what does this decision make us is a question that's going to be resonating with me for a while. So thank you for that. It's a great example of how contextual this whole conversation is, because I might assume something about Native American culture, but Cherokee different than Choctaw. No, actually within Cherokee differences within, so all of that situational.
Yeah, and Cherokee Nation is much more transactional than Eastern Band and Kituwa.
Yeah, and you say, but even within Cherokee Nation, there's going to be differences in the different formations that people have. And I'm struck that if I were in conversation with that tribe, talking, if I were you in that situation, and asked, hey guys, what's going on? Haven't heard from you for a while, being curious about the process of the transaction, that would have been very unwelcome and not helpful. Whereas in another setting, I'm at a SOCAP conference, you might ask that question to somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the fastest way to go slower with the tribe is to probe.
Mm-hmm. Probe how? What does that mean?
Is to probe, to say, hey, what's up? It's like they've said they're going off to think about it.
Oh, okay. So you're saying, yeah, that will slow things down. I got you.
Right. Like you don't get welcome to the camp if you come into the camp. You get visible and then you wait and you get invited when it's time to invite you. I mean, it's that kind of, drives me fucking crazy, but it's what you have to do.
I had a friend years ago who lived in, I guess, northwestern Maryland, very rural northwestern Maryland. And their family had been there for 20 years before they had a conversation with somebody, not on their front porch, but in their house. 20 years before they were invited in from the porch into the house. Completely friendly, friendly conversations on the porch, but that's where it was. Until
it's a whole new perspective on slow to warm up.
Yeah.
I'll just toss this quickly in, and my friends in Barcelona say they get invited to cafes, but not to the houses.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Our senses of what our intimacy gradient is a way of expressing this. Like, who would you invite into your bedroom, to your living room, onto your porch, to your block party? That there's a series of concentric rings,
Right.
and each culture and then within each person probably has different settings for like who gets to be where and how and what the framing is for that particular ring. Like, oh, in this ring, it's okay to talk about this kind of stuff, but not okay, further out, all those kinds of things. And then there are people who just like live their lives fully in public and have no rings, apparently. Alex.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. I was very I resonated with a lot of what Louise said, not about the teaching side, but about what things are like. I'm no insult intended. The chances are, if I see you in another Zoom group, I will not recognize any of you. Literally, you're different entities, and in my mind, it's a different set. I cannot recognize people. It's always a joke when going to the station. I go past neighbors and friends or whatever because they're out of context to where they're supposed to be. So the reason, it's a different mentality brain. But what on the other side is, and a number of you have said it, is I don't know how many of you have this feeling. I will not use anything or do anything or travel in anything where I don't understand how it works. I know how cars work. I know how jets work. I have looked through the manual of a 747 jet engine when I was 15 because I feel the need to know. I wouldn't get on a plane without knowing all this. I wonder how many other people feel like that, and that is the innate curiosity that some people have. And maybe I'm, like some people said, I talk to everyone. I talk to everyone so much. I have no barrier. I will ask them anything. And some people, especially in Britain, the British people, a lot of them are very reserved. And there's not difficult to cross the barrier. You can ask about the weather, you can ask about anything, not important. But as soon as you ask anything remotely personal, it's just like goes out of the window. And I kind of upset a lot of people, strangers, so that's okay. One of the things I found interesting in talking to young people, but it's not just, you know, just happened to be young people in one company I was working in. When we were doing Brexit in Britain, it was a big thing. Everybody was talking about it. It took years to resolve. And I was sitting at lunch with some young people. They're all like 22, 23, 24. And I started talking about Brexit, you know, political, you know, being me, insensitive, you know, I'll go in. And to my surprise, they all turned around, the three of them, and said, "We don't watch the news." I said, but it's a big thing, don't you care? No. I said, "Did you vote?" No, we just don't care. You know, so like they didn't say don't care, we're just not interested. And that really profoundly shocked me that there are people in this world that are like that, so incurious. On the one point about Louise and the AIs, what I want to say was I'm one of those people, because of the faces and everything else, I never understand. You can tell me something, you know, the teacher would tell me something, I could never understand it because my comprehension is not quite right, etc. And I was too embarrassed to ask clarifying questions because eventually it got really annoying to the teacher. She'd answer the same question 3 times at different angles, and I still didn't get it. But do you know what? Since ChatGPT came along, oh, fantastic. I ask the same question in different ways, and eventually I understand it. And that is brilliant. And I wonder whether kids may actually benefit from that. So, because you don't feel like you're not going to be dumb asking the same question to an AI 50 different times. But I just thought, I wonder whether that would improve things if you have the teacher and the AI to support the teaching. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex, very much. You reminded me of a little historical nugget. A friend of Kevin and mine, Joe Gouldy, who's a digital historian, wrote a book called Roads to Power, which was about the first turnpikes in England. And before they started putting in turnpikes in England, nobody knew the whole country. There was no map of the whole country. You only knew the road to the next town. And when you start getting roads, you start getting carriage rides. And when you have carriage rides, is the first time you have strangers contained in a small space, so that you have to invent things like, oh, lovely weather outside. That small talk is invented, apparently, in that culture for the close confines of long travel in a carriage. And it pervades cultures in all sorts of different ways and probably showed up in other ways in other places, but it's cool. Klaus, please.
Yeah, we have been reviewing individual curiosity, but there's also a commons persona, you know, as people. So Brexit is a great example. How was Brexit possible? It's because there was a curiosity of the commons about what does this all imply and what does it mean, and where should we be drifting and where should we be going. So looking at this not just from an individual perspective, but from a commons perspective, you know, from where the majority is moving around, and maybe having groups within the commons who have divergent opinions. I mean, that's also, I mean, it's heavily cultural, but it's also a way to define curiosity, you know, because and I'm not quite sure how to really frame this, but the common mind is curious about and interested in information, and of course it's being manipulated and messed around with. And the reason why I'm so maybe more aware of it is because, you know, I've been working on climate change. I've been working on getting people to understand food within the context of climate and environment. And there is a shift in public perception. You know, you can see that opinion bending towards an understanding of health and of nutrition and so on, and the impact on the environment. But it's and I think the curiosity is there, but you're fighting these information streams that are contradicting each other, and that are manipulated. So how does that all play a role here? How does that enter the idea of what is curiosity? If you can't distinguish between what's right and wrong, and not wanting to be misled, having to have the trust towards an information source, and then commit yourself to that information source versus dismissing others. So I think there are a lot of nuances here that are a little bit more difficult to define.
Absolutely, Klaus. You just opened up in my brain sort of the QAnon and other conspiracy theorist comment of I did the research, or do your own research, and people going off onto the intertubes and discovering God knows what. And this is sort of at that boundary between curiosity and critical thinking, but also misinformation, disinformation, et cetera, and strangely enough, collective sense making, which is an incredibly OGM-y topic. Part of the reason we're here is how do we make sense of our world together? Scott, please.
As I want to do, I have an idea about a way to define curiosity, or one definition.
And Scott, your volume seems to be really low. If you can lean toward your mic or turn up the gain or something, but keep going.
All right. Well, we'll just talk a little louder for a minute. Curiosity, noticing things you didn't have to notice. I'm going to put that in the chat. I just want to see if that resonates with anyone. I've been thinking about noticing, and that seems to fit curiosity, noticing things you didn't have to notice.
Thank you. Pete, please.
I wanted to echo Alex's discussion of not going in things that you don't know how they work. I'm not quite that extreme, but I certainly in a building or in a city or in a vehicle or whatever, wherever I'm at, I usually know a lot about the infrastructure of it, and I feel a lot better about it because of that. And it's just a way I live. It's not, I don't feel like I'm super curious about things or that I've got to find out stuff, although demonstrably kind of I am compared to other people. And I'm going to put a link to a Washington Post article, and I'm not going to archive .ph it. You'll have to do that yourself. But it's Washington Post found 47,000 conversations with ChatGPT that kind of spilled out onto the internet, and they collected them up and kind of went through them. So what do people talk with ChatGPT about? And some of the things were just like heartbreaking for me to read, because when I'm using a chat system, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, I know how it works. I know why it does what it does. How, I can predict, not entirely accurately, but I can kind of predict it's going to be good at these things. It's going to be bad at these things. It's going to pretend to be good at these things, and it's going to be wrong. And that doesn't freak me out. It's like riding in a jet airplane and knowing what kinds of things would break and are no big deal, and what kinds of things might seem like not a big deal, but they're huge and like it's a disaster, right? I know that kind of thing about jet airplanes or cars or buses or tall buildings or whatever. And so it kind of terrifies me thinking that people are using these things that are able to ape human emotions effectively, with absolutely no intent or care about what they're doing, because they cannot have care, not because they don't give a hoot. They can't, but they pretend that they do, or they act like they do in a way that confuses people. And there's a bunch of people who don't know how, you know, AI works, and they get fooled by it, and they do all kinds of crazy things with it. It reminds me also, in a strange way, I'm going to say something that I feel like is embarrassing to say in public. I am pretty successful at using, don't do this at home, folks. I'm pretty successful at using ChatGPT as health advice. And I was thinking about that. I had a kind of a health scare. I ended up in the hospital for a few days. I spent a lot of time with ChatGPT, asking stupid questions of it rather than a nurse, because nurses are busy doing other more important things, apparently. No offense to nurses or even the medical system, but ChatGPT was a huge help to me. And I'm like, okay, how can I tell people that I did this and I did it in a safe way? Because just like jet airplanes and you know, excavators and tall buildings, I know a lot about health systems too, health systems and my health and how medicine works, and I can understand an explanation from ChatGPT and ask penetrating questions about, are you sure that you thought about this or that, you know, in a way that I feel safe to navigate with ChatGPT giving me health advice. I wouldn't recommend that to most people, and again, don't do it at home. But it was shocking reading the Washington Post thing, going, oh my God, people are using these technologies and have no clue how it works, and they're getting tricked by it. Not because the thing is trying to trick it, but because they're in a context where they don't have enough information about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. Louise.
Well, that's an interesting one for me to lead on to, because I do reflect on the use of AI in an education environment. I can see there would be so many benefits. I mean, I'm fortunate to have small classes of, say, 24 students, but you can imagine trying to give those 24 students individual focused attention is very challenging. But if they have an AI bot that can respond to them, which can lead them, which can assess them and move them on, we have individual students moving at an individual pace. And I can see a huge benefit in that. But it's Pete, has given me then a lot of that concern. You know, we've got to have some confidence that AI is capable of doing that. Maybe in a focused, on a focused topic or subject, you can have an AI that could lead students through a learning experience and let them at their own pace, but also at their own level of curiosity, explore a subject. Something the conversation has really highlighted for me, which is going to be beneficial when I'm teaching, is that this curiosity is so multifaceted that I may not recognize curiosity from a student about this particular maths lesson, but they probably do have the curiosity in some area that's engrossing for them. And I may just not be aware of that. I mustn't judge them just in the environment of curiosity in my classroom and maths. So that's been very helpful today. One thing I might mention is, if you are interested in Brexit, I don't know if you've seen the film, which I found very enlightening, although I do appreciate it's sort of a docudrama where Benedict Cumberbatch plays Dominic Cummings, and it explores the ways that they managed to influence and convince the public that to exit was the vote. So that's quite interesting to watch.
Thank you so much, Louise. Excuse me. Oops, John.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the ideas about curiosity was noticing things that you don't absolutely have to notice. You may notice that I'm in a different context than I was earlier in the call. And if you're curious, I'm actually in a hyperbaric chamber, and we're just under 2 atmospheres and about 46% oxygen, which is has nominally therapeutic benefits for both certain conditions, certain disease conditions, but also, you know, as both a longevity or a cognitive enhancement tool. and that's how I'm using it. And also to build on the comments about teaching, I taught different levels, you know, young kids, high school, college, and adults. And there are techniques which, if you thought this was curiosity, you would be oversimplifying on the one hand. On the other hand, they're quite powerful, particularly if you can alter the social meaning of it. So a classic one that all of us who have done any consulting, or even just people who are here, I mean, you've heard of the 5 whys things, where you just keep asking why. You basically take apart each answer. You don't accept it as, oh, that's not the ultimate why. The ultimate other whys are underneath. That's just an example of one kind of question. I actually noticed in teaching that it's possible to overfocus on why when you haven't done the previous work about what and how. And how is a more neutral version of why. Why assumes, you know, why we tend to look for a motivation. We tend to look for a human actor and a motivation. And it's a good place to look, you know, if you're in a mystery story, or if you're in a, you know, murder mystery or other kind of mysteries. But there's other kinds of collaborative coherence of causes, and you might not notice those unless you said how instead of why, and also if you said what first. And what about the fact that students, and I had plenty of militantly uncurious students, first generation college in a mill town, you know, their ideal, their career goal was to become a shop teacher. You know, they were there. When I started talking about communication, they said, well, when are we going to laminate? And they had pictures of motorcycles and things like this they wanted to laminate. This is college. But it was a shock to me. But I found that if you created a context in which there's a social reason for participating and pursuing a question like the 5 whys, they'll participate for the social reason, and then down the road they'll get the benefit in terms of the enrichment of the conversation and the possibility of, say, oh, we actually discovered something that we weren't looking for, and we weren't particularly, if you told us to look for it, we would not have necessarily done it, but we did it in the context of playing this little game, and as a result of playing the little game, we now have a different perspective. So that's it.
Thank you, John. Kevin.
Yeah, you know, this is going from don't try this at home, and sort of part of my approach to life or something. About 25 years ago, I was in Rajasthan at a Mughal fort, and there was a fakir who does you know, a random pattern to keep a cobra from going at him. And I've been told just a few weeks before by a woman that I was hard to follow in dance. So I wanted to see how it would be with the cobra. So I bought a little pipe thing, you know, tube, whatever those things are, and got a little closer. And so the cobra focused on me, and I did my little funky thing. And within less than 30 seconds, the cobra had me figured out better than Sean McConnell's wife had. But I'd planned my exit well. I knew what to do with my right hand and with my left leg, and to spin behind, and so that he was in the line of fire. And my kids are watching me, and it's like, I didn't have to tell them, don't try this, because they'd seen me, you know, do something. But it was a great time. The moment of being eye to eye with a cobra is something I would do, and I don't regret doing, but I'm glad they didn't think they needed to do it. So I'm really glad that my kids have not seen me as a role model.
This is a good non-replicable parenting moment. Thanks, Kevin. Stacy, you're ending up in the queue after people saying incredible things. So good luck. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just I just wanted to say that I think there's a little bit of a blurry line between the noticing and the curious. And I just want to remind everybody, we are all curious. So just saying that. With the noticing, I do believe there are people that they just don't notice. And like they may not have the ability to notice. And so if you don't notice in the first place, you can't be curious. Then there are people that notice and they're not curious. And there's a difference there. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Stacy. And so much of all of this is about how we direct our attention, or how we mind our attention, or what we pay attention to, however you want to phrase that. And because only that will direct us to be curious and give us the avenue as you just described. We are very close to the end of our time together today. So I'm wondering if anybody has, Victoria, did we miss things? Would you rather us have a more solid framework? I haven't been able to track the Excalidraw board
This
very well.
Excalidraw has been growing, and it can be open longer. So anybody who wants to continue the conversation there, that would be great. It's always great to have the conversation going on. I will say that I asked here in the chat if anyone knew about the question formulation technique. That is a methodology that the Right Question Institute launched some years ago. I think we need to do something like that with a good focus question and start asking the questions first, and then like playing with these questions, prioritize, and then decide what to do. Because I love the conversation, I've learned a lot, but I don't think we have really start to uncover half of what curiosity is about. Because we were explaining our hypothesis instead of asking questions.
Okay. So the 4 rules for producing questions from the question formulation technique, I'll just read them into the room so that we're aware, because I think you're suggesting we use this.
Yes. So
Yeah.
if
So
if you want, some of the meeting could go like this, so just to practice.
So the 4 rules for producing questions are: ask as many questions as you can, do not stop to answer, judge, or discuss, write down every question exactly as stated, and then change any statements into questions. That's the process. And it would be fun to experiment with that. And Victoria, have you run any meetings or sessions where you've used this?
I was attending a seminar, more or less very informal, just like this, among people who were interested in learning about Greek mythology. And the idea was that we raised the theme, and one person was preparing the theme for the next session, and people would come with questions. Nobody did, nobody asked, of course, until I suggested this. And then we had so many questions, and we were able like to really go in the direction we wanted, because we ended with those lists of questions, prioritize them, decide what to do with them. Some people were like, for example, I want to go further, research the hero-heroine difference. I want to go through this other path. So each one decided the next session, instead of having these like standardized sessions, because they were the topics everybody talks about. And it was really enricher for everybody. So maybe we can use it at least once to uncover anything we can about curiosity or about anything else. That's not the issue, is not the theme, is that we practice with this, that maybe can bring something new to these conversations.
I like it. And I'm tempted to go back to the topic of curiosity or just shift around. I don't know. I'm open to whatever anybody wants to suggest, but I think using this would be great. I think the immediate question that comes to mind is, at the end of this process, you have apparently a really long, great list of questions. Then what do you do?
No, the next steps, the question formulation technique does not end in the list of questions.
Right?
It ends
Okay.
when you decide to prioritize the questions and what to do with the first 3 questions that are in your list.
Awesome. Thank you. Beautiful. So let's you and I talk about that some more so we can sort of set this up. Anybody else who's interested, let us know on the OGM list. We don't have Ken for a while. He's stepped away from conversations like this for a bit, so we don't have a poem from him at the end of the call, which is sad for me. But we'll be back in a week. So thank you very much for a great call. This was a
Thank
terrific
you.
exploration. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Gabriele, welcome. Thanks. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
And Louise
Thank
as
you.
well.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. I had some good insights from that. Yeah, I'm really intrigued about this asking question things. So I'm going to read and found something online, or how can I? You said that if I am interested, how can I manifest those interest if you're going to do something about this question formulating or
So
in the future?
Yeah, you are not yet on the OGM Google group, the mailing list that we use. So
No,
Victoria gave me your email address. Is it okay if I add you to the list?
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds great. And then so on that list is where we talk. That's our conversational space. So that would be the
Jerry.
place.
Nice, perfect.
Jerry, can you
Yes.
put Victoria's thing on the email? The I don't know what it's called, the CalDraw.
I will add a link to the Excalidraw map to the email that I post when I posted this session online. That's a great idea. Will do, Stacy. Thank you.
And Gabrielle, if you do write and post something, post it also to the OGM mailing list so we can see it.
Sorry, I don't.
I think you said you were going to write or post something about your exploration. I invite you to share it with us on the OGM mailing list.
Once I've put you
Okay,
on the list. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
everybody. Bye all.
Bye.